Have you ever noticed that some people seem strangely bothered by your success? No matter how kind, humble, or respectful you are, they still act irritated, competitive, or even hostile toward you. They criticize your choices. They downplay your achievements. And somehow, every victory you celebrate seems to make them uncomfortable. At first, it's confusing. You start asking yourself, did I do something wrong? Why does this person seem to have a problem with me? But what if the real issue has nothing to do with you? What if your confidence, growth, happiness, or success is exposing something they desperately want to hide? The truth is, not everyone who dislikes you actually hates you. Sometimes they hate the way your presence makes them feel about themselves. Psychologists have found that people who struggle with deep insecurity often react negatively toward those who possess qualities they wish they had. Instead of feeling inspired, they feel threatened. Instead of celebrating your progress, they secretly compare themselves to you. And because admitting feelings of inferiority is painful, those emotions often reveal themselves through subtle behaviors that most people completely miss. In today's video, we're uncovering 8 powerful signs that someone secretly feels inferior to you and absolutely hates it. Some of these signs are obvious, others are hidden in plain sight, but once you learn to recognize them, you'll never look at certain people the same way again. Make sure you stay until the end, because the final sign is often the most revealing, and it exposes what someone truly feels about you deep down. Let's get started. Healthy competition can push people to grow, but when someone secretly feels inferior to you, competition stops being healthy and starts becoming personal. Suddenly, everything you do becomes something they need to beat. You mention you're learning a new skill. They instantly tell you they've already mastered it. You share exciting news about a promotion, a business milestone, or a personal achievement. Instead of congratulating you, they immediately shift the spotlight back to themselves. It's as if every conversation becomes a silent contest. The strange part? You may not be competing with them at all. You're simply living your life. Yet they treat every interaction like a scoreboard where someone has to win and someone has to lose. Why does this happen? Because your success forces them into comparison. Every time you improve, they feel reminded of where they're falling short. Every goal you achieve becomes evidence of what they haven't accomplished. And instead of focusing on their own journey, they become obsessed with measuring themselves against yours. That's why they constantly try to one-up you, outdo you, or prove they're better. Not because they're confident, but because deep down, they're afraid they're not enough. Truly confident, people don't need to compete with everyone around them. They understand that someone else's success doesn't diminish their own. But insecure people see your growth as a threat, and that's why they can't stop trying to keep up with you. One of the biggest signs that someone secretly feels inferior to you is their inability to genuinely celebrate your success. Think about it. When good things happen to you, supportive people are excited. They congratulate you. They encourage you. They want to see you win. But insecure people often react very differently. You get promoted at work, and instead of saying, "That's amazing," they say, "Well, anyone could have gotten that position." You launch a successful business, and they respond, "You were just in the right place at the right time." You accomplish something difficult after months of hard work, and somehow they find a way to explain why it isn't really a big deal. Notice the pattern. Every achievement is minimized. Every victory comes with an excuse. Every success is reduced to luck, timing, connections, or circumstances. Why? Because if they fully acknowledge your accomplishment, they also have to acknowledge something uncomfortable. You achieved something they haven't. And that realization creates a feeling they don't want to face. So instead of giving you the credit you've earned, they shrink the value of your success. It's a psychological defense mechanism. By convincing themselves that your achievement isn't impressive, they temporarily protect their own ego from feelings of inadequacy. The truth is, confident people don't feel threatened by someone else's success. They can celebrate your victories without feeling smaller themselves. But when someone constantly downplays your accomplishments, it often reveals more about their insecurities than it does about your achievements. And sometimes, the louder they dismiss your success, the more threatened they actually feel by it. This sign is one of the most revealing and one of the hardest to spot. 2, because it usually hides behind fake concern, forced sympathy, or polite words. The next time something goes wrong in your life, pay close attention to how certain people react. Do they seem unusually interested in the details? Do they keep bringing up your setback? Do they suddenly become more talkative, more confident, or even happier around you? At first, it may seem harmless, but beneath the surface, something deeper could be happening. Psychologists use the term Schadenfreude to describe the satisfaction some people feel when they witness another person's misfortune. And while that may sound harsh, it often comes from insecurity rather than cruelty. You see, when you're succeeding, growing, and achieving your goals, insecure people are forced to compare themselves to you. Your progress reminds them of what they haven't accomplished. Your confidence highlights their self-doubt. But when you experience a setback, that uncomfortable comparison temporarily disappears. Suddenly, they feel less behind, less threatened, less inadequate. That's why some people seem strangely energized by your failures, but completely indifferent to your victories. They may never admit it out loud, but your struggles give them something they desperately crave relief, because for a brief moment, they no longer feel like they're losing the comparison game they've created in their own mind. And that's a powerful sign that their issue was never with your failure. It was always with your success. There's a huge difference between constructive feedback and constant criticism. Constructive feedback is meant to help you grow. Constant criticism is often meant to make someone else feel better about themselves. If someone secretly feels inferior to you, they may become obsessed with finding flaws in everything you do. No matter how hard you work, it's never enough. No matter what you achieve, there's always something wrong with it. They criticize your appearance, your decisions, your goals, your relationships, your personality. Even your successes somehow become reasons for criticism. At first, it can feel confusing. You may start wondering if they're simply being honest or trying to help, but over time, a pattern begins to emerge. They rarely acknowledge what's right. They focus almost entirely on what's wrong. Why? Because criticism creates a temporary illusion of superiority. If they can convince themselves that you're flawed, unsuccessful, or inadequate, they don't have to face their own insecurities. Every negative comment becomes a small boost to their ego. Every judgment gives them a momentary sense of control. The irony is that genuinely confident people rarely spend their time tearing others down. They're too busy building themselves up. Secure people don't need to constantly point out your weaknesses because your strengths don't threaten them. But insecure people often feel uncomfortable around those they secretly admire or envy. So instead of celebrating your growth, they search for imperfections. Remember this: when someone constantly criticizes everything about you, they're often revealing far more about their own inner struggles than they are about you. Sometimes the loudest criticism comes from the deepest insecurity. This sign often catches people completely off guard. Because when someone feels inferior to you, their behavior isn't always negative. Sometimes it's the exact opposite. They secretly admire you. In fact, they may admire you so much that they start copying nearly everything you do. At first, it seems harmless. Maybe they begin dressing like you. Maybe they suddenly develop the same interests, hobbies, or goals. Maybe they start using the same phrases, opinions, or habits you've become known for. And initially, you might even feel flattered. After all, imitation can be a form of admiration. But when the copying becomes constant, it can reveal something deeper. People who are secure in themselves usually feel comfortable expressing their own personality. They trust their own ideas, preferences, and identity. But someone who feels inferior often struggles with self-confidence. Deep down, they may believe that who they are isn't enough. So instead of building their own identity, they begin borrowing yours. They see qualities in you that they wish they possessed. Your confidence, your success, your mindset, or the way others respond to you. And rather than developing those qualities from within, they try to recreate them on the outside. Their imitation becomes a silent confession. It says, I see something valuable in you that I don't see in myself. The truth is, copying isn't always driven by jealousy. Sometimes it's driven by admiration mixed with insecurity. They want what you have. They want the confidence you carry. They want the results you're achieving. But because they don't yet believe in their own path, they end up following yours instead. And that can be one of the clearest signs that they secretly feel inferior to you. Have you ever noticed someone becoming defensive over the smallest things you say? You offer a simple suggestion, and they immediately start explaining themselves. You share an opinion, and they act as if you've personally criticized them. You achieve something meaningful, and they quickly point out that they could do the same thing if they really wanted to. At first, this behavior can seem confusing, but often their reaction has very little to do with what you actually said. It's about what your presence represents. When someone secretly feels inferior, they often assume they're being judged even when no judgment exists. Your confidence reminds them of their self-doubt. Your progress reminds them of goals they've delayed pursuing. As a result, they become overly sensitive and quick to defend themselves. The truth is, they're not reacting to your words. They're reacting to the insecurities already playing on repeat inside their own mind. And sometimes, the more defensive they become around you, the more threatened they feel by your growth. Some people don't just feel threatened by your confidence, they actively try to weaken it. Why? Because bringing you down feels easier than building themselves up. These are the people who disguise insults as jokes and then tell you you're too sensitive when you react. They point out your mistakes in front of others. They question your abilities, your decisions, and even your dreams. And whenever you're making progress, they suddenly become experts at telling you why it won't work. Pay close attention to people who constantly plant seeds of doubt in your mind, especially during moments when you're growing, succeeding, or stepping outside your comfort zone. Supportive people encourage your potential. Insecure people often feel threatened by it. The stronger your confidence becomes, the more uncomfortable the comparison feels for them. So they try to close the gap by making you doubt yourself. But remember this, their attempts to undermine you are not a reflection of your value. They're a reflection of the battles they're fighting within themselves. And often, the people who work hardest to shrink your confidence are the ones most intimidated by it. This may be the most revealing sign of all. Someone who secretly feels inferior to you might tolerate your presence. They might even tolerate your success. But your happiness? That's often where things become difficult for them. Why? Because happiness is hard to explain away. People can dismiss your achievements as luck. They can criticize your accomplishments. They can tell themselves you had advantages they didn't. But genuine happiness is different. When someone sees you living with confidence, peace, gratitude, and purpose, they're forced to confront something much deeper, their own dissatisfaction. Your happiness becomes a mirror. And that reflection isn't always comfortable. That's why some people become distant, cold, irritated, or strangely negative whenever something good happens in your life. Instead of celebrating with you, they seem bothered by your joy, not because you've done anything wrong, but because your happiness highlights what they feel is missing in their own lives. The truth is, secure people are inspired by the happiness of others. Too insecure people often feel threatened by it. And sometimes the strongest sign that someone secretly feels inferior to you isn't how they react to your failures. It's how uncomfortable they become when they see you truly happy. If you recognized several of these signs in someone you know, here's something important to remember. People who secretly feel inferior to you aren't always bad people. In many cases, they're simply fighting battles within themselves that they haven't learned how to overcome. That doesn't justify toxic behavior, but it does help explain it. The biggest mistake you can make is allowing their insecurity to slow down your growth. You don't need to prove yourself to them. You don't need their approval, and you certainly don't need to shrink your light to make someone else feel comfortable. Keep pursuing your goals. Keep becoming the person you're meant to be. Stay humble enough to keep learning, but confident enough to know your worth. Because truly secure people don't feel threatened by the success, confidence, or happiness of others. They celebrate it. They respect it. They learn from it. Confidence inspires. Insecurity competes. So the next time someone seems bothered by your growth, remember, their reaction says more about their mindset than it does about your value. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another psychology and self-improvement video. And now, I want to hear from you. Which of these signs have you experienced the most in your own life? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.